We are going to learn how to build a real-time chat application with React.js and integrate it to an ongoing project. To show you what we will be having at the end of this video, I'm logged in here with a user called Jando, and on this tab I'm logged in with Anne-Claire. Let's say while Jando is scrolling, Anne-Claire decides to contact him. So she would go to this chat app. That's what we will be having. So she would click on this button and choose Jando. And after choosing, she can also decide to contact another person. So we'll be thinking of all of these small details. Then she would say something like, hi John. And also notice when I didn't type anything, this was gray and I can click it. It is disabled. So we'll be thinking of all of these small user experience stuff. So let's say now I'm gonna write and I'm gonna say, hi John. Now I can, since I have some content here, I can click on this button. So it's saying the message is sent, and on the Jando side, he would get this notification. And if I click here, I will see that Anne-Claire has sent me a message, okay? So if I click on it, on the Anne-Claire side, it's going to say that the message has been read. And Jando can respond also instantaneously. So if he sends this message, Anne-Claire would receive it instantaneously without refreshing anything. So we'll be leveraging WebSockets to have this experience. And let's say I go back here and Anne writes to me again. So I would get the number of new messages that I haven't read yet. If she sent another one, so it's going to be 2. So that's what we will be having at the end of this video. We're going to be learning a lot and think of all these small details, like disabling the button, like allowing the user to see his connections, to choose a connection, to also change his mind, and all the I have gone ahead and cloned the project on my computer. I have opened the backend folder and run my Docker. Then I've opened the backend folder again to run the backend in watch mode, then the backend server, then the front-end server. You can do all of this by reading the README here. And then I have opened the front-end folder in VS Code here. And here on the right side, I have a Chrome tab, and I am logged in as Jando. And as of now, if we go to the messaging URL, we don't have anything. That's because if we look into our route here, I make it smaller. So here on the messaging path, we just are rendering messaging, this div tag. So the first thing that we need is to create a messaging page, okay? So I'm gonna go here into the features. Like here we have implemented authentication. Here was a feed, and here was WebSocket. So actually, if you are new to this video, as I said, it's part of the playlist, and everything, like we went through what WebSockets are, we explained them in this video, and we implemented the notification for liking and commenting. So let's say Anne-Claire likes the post of Jando. If I click on like, and I'm gonna make this bigger, as you can see, I'm getting this notification. And if I go here, it says Anne-Claire liked their post, and I click, I see the post. And if, let's say, Anne-Claire writes a comment, also, it's gonna be instantaneous, and we'll be getting this notification. So we actually went ahead, we explained what WebSockets are, we integrated them, and built this notification. So if you don't know anything about WebSockets, I highly suggest that you start with this video, okay? So in this video, we explained what WebSockets are as a protocol, okay? Then implemented them on the backend side, but also on the front, on the React side. So WebSocket is always a system that's done like it needs the two parts. It needs the backend and the front end. And even if you are not interested in backend development with Java, it's not gonna actually, the backend side of this video is not going to be very long. You would just get an idea of how it is implemented in Java. And it's gonna be similar to other languages. the idea is to understand the protocol itself, okay? And then here we build the backend logic for the chat. And this one, if you're not interested in backend development, you don't need to watch it, okay? We'll be having all the endpoints available, and we'll be using them here. Let us start by creating the messaging page. The messaging page is gonna be, we're gonna add it in a features folder that's gonna be called a messaging, like so. And we'll be having a pages folder, and within this pages folder we'll be having a folder that's gonna be called messaging. Then create the messaging file and also its style. I'm gonna create the boilerplate. I'm gonna for now add just M here, and we're gonna import it here. Like so. And yeah, it should be messaging. Like so. And now, as you can see, it's showing M here. Like so. What this messaging page will contain. So let me actually show you the final result here. This it's the final project. It's running on a different port, as you can see, as what we're doing here. So as you can see, we have a sidebar, like so, where we are able to start a new conversation and all. And if after starting, like on the right side, we have the conversation itself. And as you can see, the conversation actually is on a new, on a different URL. Like if I click on it, if I actually, like let's say, come back here. So we are on messaging. And when we click here, we're going to messaging conversation to new. And if I choose a conversation and let's say start it, so as you can see, I'm on messaging /conversation/1. So the messaging actually is done with the help of 2 pages. So for that, we're gonna actually come back here in the main, and here we'll be having another. So here we'll be having a children array, and here we'll be having a path that is going to say conversation /id, like so. And here we'll be rendering an element that's going to be a conversation component, which is a different page actually. For now we don't have it. So this different page, it is actually like rendered as, so it's not completely decorrelated from the messaging page. This is why we are having it as the children of this. So the messaging page is actually wrapping the conversation. So when we are just on the messaging, we have this, but if we go to a conversation, we are rendering the children URL, but we are keeping actually everything that was before on the left side. So let us come back and actually have it here. And here we're going to create this page. So it's going to be within the pages folder here. So we're going to call it conversation, like so. For now, I'm going to render a C like before, create its CSS. And here we're going to import it, like so. So now if I go to messaging /conversation/NID, we're going to be rendering, we should be rendering the conversation, but we don't have anything. That's because we didn't actually tell this messaging page, which is acting as a layout for this one, how to render its a child. So we're going to come here and we're going to say I'm going to be rendering the outlet from React Router like so. Now if I save, as you can see, we are seeing the C that is coming from the conversation. And if I go back just to conversation, I only see the MR that's coming from the messaging. And if we look at the final design once more, I'm actually gonna log in as Jando as well. So if we look at the final design here, I'm gonna go to the messaging. So I'm gonna come back. So that's what we have on mobile. So at the top we have the header, and then we have a conversation list. So that's actually the conversation list. If we have another one, it's going to be shown here, and all of these. So if let's say I start another one with some junk. So as you can see here, we have a conversation list, and when we click on a conversation, we are redirected to the conversation page. So I'm gonna make it smaller, come back. So at the top we would be having a header, then below the header we'll be having the conversation list, and below the conversation list we'll be having the conversation itself, like when it's opened. And on bigger screens the conversation is going to be at the left. So knowing all of this, we're going to come back to our code. So I'm going to come back here to the messaging. So what we will be having will be, I'm going to for now remove that, and we'll be having at the top. Actually, let me paste the markup in the explain so that you don't watch me type it. It's going to be a waste of your time. So I'm going to paste the markup here like so. So what I am doing here, I am actually calling the use page title. This is a hook that we built in previous video, and all it does, it's just gonna grab the title of the page that we are currently on and set the document title. So if we look here the document title, which is here, is saying LinkedIn messaging, and if I go to the home page, it says LinkedIn feed, and if I go to the notification, it says LinkedIn notification. So that's what we are doing with this special title. So coming back to the messaging, and also we need to import the use navigate from React Router DOM. That will help us when we click. So when we click on one of the messaging list, to redirect us to the conversation URL, and that will be doing so with the help of the navigate from React Router DOM. So here we have the messaging at the left, and at the right we have the right sidebar that we built in previous videos as well. So don't worry, all of this is going to go away in a bit. So for now, let me come back. Where was I? So I was here. For now, let me actually comment this out, as we don't have the list of conversation for now. So as you can see, we have the messaging at the left, and on the right side we have like the ads class. This ads class actually is what we are showing here. So in our case, for now we are just showing a connection suggestions, but it could be some ad later on. And then at the left we have the messaging. So that's what our markup is saying. And within the markup we have a sidebar. So this is the sidebar within the messaging. And at the right side of the sidebar we have the conversation page, which is rendered with the outlet. But it is not good, because we don't have the styling of all of this. I'm gonna paste it, the styling, and I will walk you through. Okay, so what we are doing is that we are saying that our the root, which is the page, which is the messaging, which is this, I'm setting a height of 100% so that it takes all the available height here. I'm also saying that it's a display grid. I'm adding some styles on the header, which is this, so that is helping me to have the text in the button like next to each other. And then I'm styling the button a little bit, adding some hover animation. Then I'm grabbing the messaging. So the messaging, if you don't know, is this part. It's this part. So here I'm adding some background, some border radius, and some border, which is why we're able to have actually this rounded shape. And we are designing the website to be mobile first. So that's why everything that you are seeing here actually is for the mobile view. And on the mobile, we don't want to see the ads, like the connection suggestions. That's here. So that's why we're saying that it shouldn't be displayed. And when we go on bigger screens, we're saying that, so here, if you remember, everything that's within the messaging, so the header and the conversation are top to bottom. And when we go on bigger screen, on this size, we're saying that the messaging should have a display of grid, and we want the sidebar, so at the left, and the conversation at the right, and we are adding a border right on the sidebar. So if I make it bigger to some extent, so as you can see, we have the sidebar here, which will contain the this button in the header in the list of conversation, and the conversation itself at the right, and we are adding this border like so. And if we go on even bigger screens, okay, we are setting a 2 columns style on the page itself. So, and then we are bringing back the ads here. Coming back to the markup, so let me make it smaller here. I commented this one because we didn't have it. Let me bring it back, and we're gonna create this component in the messaging feature, but within a component folder like we did for the previous ones, so that we keep a similar structure like everywhere. Okay, so we have components that are on the project level that are used by all the features, and each features would have components that will be used by the feature. So here I'm going to create a component that's going to be called conversations, like so. Let me add a C for now. Also create a style. And I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to import it. Save. If I refresh now, so we have this C. And what this component is, this conversation component is going to render. So as I said, it is this one. So it will be rendering the list of conversations. And I'm gonna come back, so within the component here. And first thing first, we're gonna be needing to have a state to handle all the conversations. So it's going to be an empty, but we need to define the type of this conversation, so what it would look like. So I'm gonna be creating an interface that's gonna be called conversation, like so. And let me paste it and explain what it contains. So a conversation will have an ID, an author, which is going to be a user that we already have in our authentication, and a list of messages. We don't have this message, we will be defining it in a bit. And I actually made a typo here. And then we're gonna map through this conversation. So we're gonna say conversations.map conversation, and for each conversation we'll be returning. So we'll be returning a conversation component that we don't have yet. Conversation, and yeah, the key is going to be conversation ID, and we will also pass the conversation itself. And this component, we don't have it. We're going to create it, But before, let me actually import this from React. And also we're gonna handle when we don't have any conversation. So when the conversation list is empty, we'll be rendering a div. So I'm gonna paste it. So we'll be rendering this div instead. Why it's yelling? Yeah, sorry, here it should be an array, like so. So we'll simply show no conversation to display, and we're adding some padding. Now we're gonna be able to create this conversation component. For now, I'm just gonna be rendering C. Like so. And here we're gonna import it. And TypeScript is going to yell at us, and it's gonna say that you cannot pass this conversation to the component because we didn't define the type, actually, the prop of this conversation component. So let us come back here, and I'm going to create an interface and also import this from the conversation component, and this one will be using it here. So props, conversation props, like so. And now if I save and come back here to the conversations component here, as you can see, it's not yelling anymore. So we are still getting no conversation to display, although we have actually some conversation in our database because we created them using the final result here. So this final result actually is targeting the same backend. So we should be seeing these messages here, but we don't because we didn't fetch them actually. So I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna use a use effect, like so. And here we're gonna use our request. So we created this request utility in previous videos that's helping us to use the JavaScript fetch to grab the data from our database. So I'm gonna come back here. So we'll be using this fetch, and this fetch is going to be returning us a list of conversations. So conversation list. Sorry, Copilot, that's not what I want to do. So like so. And here we're gonna pass the endpoint, and the endpoint is going to be to API version 1 / messaging to conversation. And then here we're gonna say on success, like so. We're gonna grab the data, and we're gonna pass it to our set conversations, like so. And on failure, we're gonna grab the error and log it for now, like so. So as you can see, we are getting the three conversations that we have here. For each message, we are displaying C because we are not using this conversation here. So if we look into the network, like so. So if actually you didn't know the type of the conversation that we are getting back, like me, you could have simply inspected the URL, like for the conversation here, and see the response, and you're gonna be able to know what you are getting back. So as I said earlier, a conversation is gonna be having an ID, then an author, then a recipient, then a list of messages. And you could have like copied this object, and there are a lot of tools that are gonna use the JSON and create a TypeScript type out of it. Also, like something like ChatGPT can do it as well. But the recipient, we don't need to do that because that's actually the user. We already defined it in previous videos because that's what we are using all over the project, like here as well. Let me close that. I'm going to come back here in the conversation component, and what we will be rendering here, I'm going to paste the markup and explain. Okay, it's going to make sense, bear with me, like so. It's scary, but don't worry, it's gonna make sense in a bit. So first thing first, we're gonna use actually an internal state here that we will call conversation, set conversation, like so, and we'll use state and pass it the conversation that we're getting from the parent. So why we're not using directly the conversation from the parent here? Well, because here actually we're going to be subscribing to our WebSocket, and then when there is a new message, we'll be grabbing it to render the number of messages that are not read here using this bubble. And for this, we don't want to use the conversation that's coming from the outside, because if we do that, we would have to render all the conversations that are here every time one of them changes. Okay, and we don't want that. So let me come back here, and I'm gonna grab the navigate from the React router DOM, like so. And then if I show you here on the final design, if I go here, as you can see, I am changing the background of the selected conversation, and this we are doing it with the help of this class. So we are saying if the ID of the conversation, which is here, which is this one, so the number 1 in this case, so if the ID of the conversation is matching the ID of that we have in the URL, okay, we want to add this selected class. But how we would grab the ID that's in the URL? So that's what we'll be doing with the help of the params, this params component hook from the React router DOM. So what we are saying here is, so by default the ID here is going to be a string, as you can see, and it can also be undefined. So that's what we are doing here. If it's not undefined, and so we are going to convert it to a number and compare it with the conversation ID, and we do that. And if we click on the button, we are redirecting to the URL that's corresponding. Come back, and then here we are. So let's say actually how we are displaying this. So Jendo, let's say Jendo starts a new conversation with Musa, okay, Musa Diop, and I'm gonna say I'm gonna send. But here we're not actually showing the profile of Jendo. We are showing the profile of the person that Jendo is interacting with. It would be weird to have your own image here, okay? So we're gonna be having a conversation to display. So we're gonna logically grab the conversation to display here. So I'm going to also grab the connected user using our authentication context that we built in previous videos as well, like so. So what I'm saying is that if the conversation recipient, so here we could have showed the conversation recipient or the conversation ID or the conversation author. Here we show its image, and also let's say its number of its first name and last name. But we could, in some cases, we'd be showing the name of the user that's connected. That we don't want. So this is why we're doing this. We're saying if the conversation recipient ID is equal to the connected ID, okay, I want to show the author, and if it's not the case, I'm going to show the recipient. So in our case, when John started this conversation with Musa, he is not the recipient. He is the author of the conversation. So this is going to be false, and then we're going to show the recipient, which is Musa. Okay, and then we also have this unread message count, but we don't have that yet. I'm going to also paste it and explain. So all it does is that it's going to go through the conversation state, filter all the messages, and grab the message. So we're going to go and grab the message where the receiver ID is our current user and that they are not read. And then we're going to grab the links. So when you are the person that has sent the message, that like we don't count this as a notification, which is normal. We count the conversation also, or like only for the receiver of the message. So that's what we are doing here. And then we're gonna conditionally display this next to the image. But since we're gonna be having it with a position absolute, it's actually gonna be out of the conversation layout here, but at the right here. And then next to the image, we'll be having this, where we are showing the first name and last name of the conversation user to display, which is this. And then we are showing the conversation content. So we are going through the conversation messages, and then grabbing the last one that has been generated to show a preview. Okay. So although we have if let's say I'm going to send another one, although we have different messages here, we are only showing the last one as a preview. So that's what we are doing here. And now if I come back here and refresh, so as you can see, we have our conversation like on the final design, but the styling is missing. And I'm gonna paste it and also walk you through. Save, and as you can see, it has changed. And what we're doing in the styling is that we're saying that the image in the text that's below, so this image and the div that's below, they should be next to each other with the help of this display flex. Then we're adding some gap, align items, saying that the text should be aligned to the left. We're adding some padding. We're saying the width is going to be 100%, because if we remove, since it's a button, it's not going to take all the available width. Remember, this is a button actually, this. So adding back the font size, adding some border bottom to separate each of them, then some padding bottom. We can say that it should have a position relative, because we want to style this and read message absolutely within the parent. So here we're saying it should be absolute. So just to show you something, I'm gonna say just to have something that we didn't read, I'm gonna add 1. Okay, so for all of them we are seeing it. So it has this background of crimson. We're saying the top should be to 50% to 50% from the parent, and then we are using this translate to slightly center it. Okay, if we didn't have, this is where it would be, because the top 50% is going to be calculated using the height, the top side of the bubble. So using this, we are fetching it and adding it in the middle, and then some background, and we are adding some width to have a round shape, adding this 50%, some font size. And then we're saying when this has a selected class, I want you to change its background slightly. So that's what we are doing here, the selected, which is this, when the conversation ID that's in the URL matches the conversation that's displayed by the button. Coming back, then adding some style on the avatar, on the name, and also on the content. So if I make it bigger, as you can see, when the content is quite long, we are showing only some, and then we are showing this 3 dots, and that we are doing it with the help of this hack. All of this, actually we need all of this to be able to have this. If I say that this is 2 and this is 2 as well, as you can see now it's cutting at 2 lines. Coming back, I'm gonna remove this one. So earlier I was saying that when we get a new message, we want to update the this one. So we would need to add the number of new messages, but also change the preview. So how we would do that? Like, let's say here on the final design, if here also, if unclear sends a new message, let's say like so, as you can see here, without me refreshing, so without having to go to this use fetch, which only runs when the page load, we are getting the new messages. So how the conversation is able to know that? And I'm not on the right place. So how the conversation here knows that? That's because actually it is subscribed to a WebSocket topic. And I will actually paste it and explain what it does. So I'm gonna add it somewhere below here. And we're gonna import the use effect. And bear with me, it's gonna make sense in a bit, okay? Then I'm gonna import the WebSocket from our use WebSocket hook here. And by default, actually, this WebSocket is null. So what's happening here is actually by default it's null, and when the connection happens, we are setting the state that we are returning here. So this is why here we're adding, no, I'm not on the right place. So here we're adding it to the conversation, to the use effect list, so that when it changes, we would render it here. And actually, I'm gonna grab the subscription here, like so, and I'm gonna return. I'm gonna say subscription non unsubscribe. So let me explain what's happening here. So we are subscribing to our WebSocket when it's not null using this, and we are subscribing to this topic that we built in the backend video, and then we are parsing the JSON. So the JSON is going to be a message, and then we're gonna go and call our set conversation. As I said, that's why we are not using the conversation that's coming from the outside, because when the number of conversation, when a new message is added to this conversation only, we don't want to go through the parent and render the others, okay? So we are using the previous conversation object, and we're going through its messages and trying to find the ID of the newly added, like newly received message. So if this ID does not exist, the index is going to be -1. So if it doesn't exist, we're simply gonna add it at below at the end of the array. We destructure the previous and then add it at the end. So if that's not true, it means that the message is already in our state here, but it has changed. This actually happens when, for example, here, let's say I'm here, and it's saying send. So if I click here, okay, if I click here it's changing, it's saying red. That's because with this WebSocket subscription, we're getting the updated message. So that happens, when that happens, we need to do this logic. So the message is going to be part of the messages list. This is why this won't pass. So here what we are doing, we are going through all the messages of this conversation, and when we find the message where the message ID is the same as what we received like newly, we're gonna use it. Otherwise we use the message itself. So now let's say I'm gonna click here. We are getting an error. Yeah, actually my bad. Actually everything that we did here, this is not the conversation page, so it should have been the conversation component, which is this one. So the obvious thing should be here, okay? And the conversation page, as of now, we didn't implement it. So I'm gonna revert back to what it was before. So we only had this C. Save it. This is weird, right? We're getting these C's. Yeah, actually, I think that we made an import mistake. So if I come back here to the conversation list, which is here, this should actually not be coming from the pages. So this is the component that's coming from the conversation. So it should be a component, as you may know. So I'm gonna come here and grab also the style, which should be here, like this. So when we go to a page, we would show this C. And if we are only on the messaging, we're not seeing anything. If I click here, we're showing the C. That is, if you remember, rendered by our outlet. And if you have noticed, like on the final design, I'm gonna close this. If I open a conversation, we are only seeing the conversation with this back button, but we are not displaying this, okay, the conversation list. But here, although we are on a conversation page, this is being visible. So that's the first thing that we need to fix here. So here, what we're gonna say is that we're gonna we're gonna say are we on a conversation page? This is going to be true when the location dot path dot include the conversation, like if it includes this conversation word, okay. And this location, we're gonna actually grab it from the use location hook that is coming from the React router DOM, like so. And then we are also gonna be needing, like we need to know the width of our screen. So if you remember here, if I am on a small screen and I click on this, I am not showing the list of conversations because I don't have enough space. But if I am on a bigger screen, although I have clicked, I'm still showing this, okay. So that's what we need that's why we need to know the width of our screen here. Like this won't be sufficient alone, okay. So I will be having a state before this that is going to grab the width of the window, and then I'm gonna go below here. So here the sidebar, and I'm going to add a style. So we're gonna have a style, and we're gonna say that the display is going to be like when the window width is greater than 2024, or that we are not on the conversation. I want you to make it block, otherwise it should be none. So now if I come back, I'm gonna refresh it. So as you can see, the list, which is the sidebar, is gone because we are on a conversation page. If I come back to the messaging, it's visible. And when I click, this is false because the screen is small, and also this is true, so this is false. So all of this, like all of this part, is going to be false. So we will have to add the display none. But if I go on bigger screens, like even if I go here, we're not seeing the sidebar. It should appear like here. Like here, when I go on small screen, it's not shown, but I go on bigger screen, it's being shown. So how we do that? And actually, that's why I didn't use this directly here. Like I didn't do directly here, but I'm using a state. That's because I want to update the state when when the user plays with the screen size. So here, I'm gonna come here and I'm going to add a use effect, and that will run when the page load, and here we'll be having a handle size function. In this handle size function, all it does, it is going to call our set width window, and we'll be using this event listener. So every time the user changes its size, we want to run this function. So now if I go on bigger screens, hopefully, as you can see, it's appearing. And we also need the cleanup function, so that when the component is removed from the screen, we clean up all of this, so that we don't spend like memory. So save. So now that is working. The remaining thing is to work on the conversation page. So this conversation page is going to be displayed when we click on this button, like that is redirecting us to the new. So if we go to new like this, it is displayed. But also if, like for the new, we are displaying this, where we are able to search like for a user and then select it. So if the conversation already exists, we are showing it, and if it doesn't, we are going to help it to create. So the same page is handling the creation of a conversation, but also the displaying of it. So let me come back here and come to the page here, and come back to our current state. So here we're only showing a C. This is the component that's going to be the more complex of everything that we did so far. And I'm gonna paste it, and I'm gonna walk you through everything. Bear with me. It's going to seem like a lot, but it's gonna make sense in a bit. I'm going to paste it. Bear with me. It's gonna make sense in a bit, okay? For now, I'm also gonna be for now I'm gonna command this, okay, and I will walk you through all of this. And before, let me paste the styling as well here. Save. And here I'm just for now gonna render a div, so that we have something that's similar to what we have normally. So what we have in this component, bear with me, it seems a lot, but it's going to make sense in a bit. So we are rendering a div. So we're rendering a div that has a class name that's going to be called class.root, like for all the others. And also we're checking if we are creating a new conversation, we're adding this class that's called new, and not if it's not, we're just rendering this root. And this creating new conversation is, if I click on it, so it is checking whether the ID that is within. So if you remember, if I click on this button, the ID, the last part of the conversation here, is becoming ID, is becoming new here. Okay, so that's what we are checking here in the conversation page. So we're grabbing that ID and we're checking if this ID is equal to new. So we're saying that we are on the creation page. Okay, bear with me, it's gonna make sense. So that's what we are having first, and we're using this new to have different styles here that I will also be walking you through in a bit. So then what we are doing, we're saying that I should display this if I have a conversation that is corresponding to the ID, or that I am creating, or that I am on the new URL. So by having that check, we won't be having errors if, for example, the user tries to go to a conversation and he gives an ID that do not exist. Okay, if that happens, our backend, when we make the call, so if I show you actually where we're making the call here, bear with me, it's gonna make sense. So when this page render, we are using the ID, and then if the ID is not equal to new, we are making a request to our backend and setting the conversation. And if he used an ID that does not exist, like this junk, okay, our request would fail, and if that happens, we redirect simply to the messaging. And so while we are making this request, our conversation state is going to be null. So this is why we are using this. So we are saying the conversation should be there before rendering the content of the page. And if it doesn't exist, we should be on the new URL. So that's what's happening here. In coming back to our use effect, where was I? Bear with me, it's gonna make sense. All of this is going to make sense. So coming back here, if we are on the new, we are setting the conversation to null. Like, let's say I am on this conversation and then I click on new. So if that happens, I'm going to remove the conversation state and I'm going to grab the users that are in our database and set it. And this we are using to render a suggestion box, which is this. Okay, so I'm gonna close this, make it smaller. Let me keep it in, but I'm gonna explain in a bit. So then what we are saying is that I want you to display a header where we would have this back button. When we click on the back button, I want you to redirect me to the messaging. So that's what happens when I click here. I come back, let's say, so you see the URL. So if I click here, I'm going back to the messaging. And then below, what we are doing, actually we don't need this check again because we are checking. Actually we need it because we are entering this block. We can enter this block where the conversation is null, but the creating new conversation is true. So when that's the case, we shouldn't be displaying this. So let's say I'm on the new. Okay, when I'm on the new, I don't want to display. So actually what this is displaying, so this is when I click here, this block is displaying this. So the user that I am discussing with, if I come back and I click here, the user is our job, and if I'm here, the user is this. So that's what we are doing. So when we're creating a new message, we don't display this. So I'm gonna click here instead. So when we're creating a message, instead we would display a form. So it says this is a form, and in this form we have a p tag that says starting a new conversation, and when we have a selected user, we're gonna say with. And since if we click on a user where we already have a conversation, we go to the conversation. I've went ahead actually and created a new user because currently our John Doe has a conversation with all of these. So I created this one so that I show you what we have here. So let me come back, like the with logic. So now if I click on this, okay, we're saying you are starting a conversation with, and when we don't have a selected user, we show the search that's at the bottom, at the top. And if we have, we would show the user itself. So here our user doesn't have a picture, so we will be showing the default PNG, like so. As you can see, it has changed. So, and then if I, let's say here, there is this button on the right here, there is the information about the user, and at the right we have the button. If I click, I'm gonna remove the selected user. So if I remove, we are showing back the search input and the suggestions below. And these suggestions, we show them when we don't have a selected user and we don't also have a conversation. So when that happens, what we are doing is we're rendering a div, and in this div we're going through a suggesting users array. We filter it using the what the user types here. Okay, so if I like show you the input again, this is where we're setting a search. The thing that the user type here, we are setting it here with the help of this set search state. And here we use the search and grab all the users where the search is included in its first name or in its last name, like so. And then we map over it and we show a button. This button, when we click on it, we are gonna go and find the conversation. So we're gonna try to find a conversation where the recipient ID is our current ID or the author ID is our current ID. If that's the case, like if there is a conversation, we want simply to redirect the user to the conversation. So there shouldn't be two different conversations between two people. And if that's not the case, like there is no conversation between the two, we simply set the selected user. And this, like the suggestions, are like we're simply rendering the picture at the left, and then the information of the user at the right. So that's the first form that we have on the page. The form when we're creating a conversation. And then below that here, we'll be rendering the list of conversations. Like if we're rendering this one, it means that there is a conversation. And I'm going to be creating this component in a bit. But before, let me show you what we have at the end of the page. So at the end of the page, we have a new conversation, like a new form, another form. And in this form, what we're doing is that we're rendering this input, and a button. This button is disabled when we are sending, like the request for sending a message is not done, but also it's disabled when there is no content. And this content is a state as well. It's here. Like the search is a state, like the suggesting users is a state. So coming back. So within the form, as I was saying, we have an input in the button. So the button is disabled when the message is being sent, but also when we don't have anything in the input. So the input value is this content that we are changing whenever the user type in it, like so. And when we submit, the unsubmit of the form is going to fire. And what it's doing is that it checks if there is no content, it's going to return. Although that is not going to happen actually. We could for now remove it because since the button is disabled, there is no way he could send it. But actually he can just inspect. Let me show you. I'm going to inspect here. If I'm a clever user, I know a little bit about HTML, so I'm going to remove this. And now I can send an empty. So this is why we are adding this check here. And also on the backend side, we should have a check, but I don't remember if we did that. So, and then we're going to say that if we have a conversation and that we are sending something, we're going to call a function that's called add message to conversation. And if it's not the case, we're going to call a function that's called create conversation with message. And finally, after sending, so here, let's say after sending, I'm going to clear up what is within the input and also remove the selected user. And let me show you what these two functions look like. Look, so the first one is gonna grab the event that we are getting from the form. We're going to prevent the default because by default it's going to try to refresh the page. Then we're going to say the set posting message to true, which is being used here, this one, to disable the page as well, the button as well. So we're going to say the set posting to true, and then we're going to use our request function that we have been using so far to call this endpoint with a post, and then we're going to send a body where the backend is actually expecting for a content and for a receiver ID. The content is going to be simply the content that's within here, but the receiver ID we need actually some logic here. So when adding a message to a conversation, we need to know the other person. So the receiver of the receiver ID of the message is the other person that is within the conversation. But who is this other person? The other person could be the author of the conversation, but also the recipient. Like he could have been the person who initiated the conversation or not. So that's what we are doing here with this check. So we are looking for the recipient of the conversation. If it is the same of the user that is sending the message, we're going to use the author of the conversation. and if it's not the case, we're going to use the recipient of the conversation. And then there is the create conversation with message that we're using below. And here what we are doing, here we're going to also prevent default, and then we create a message object. The receiver is simply going to be the selected user's ID, then the content, and then we're going to call our endpoint. So we're going to pass it to JSON, and when we receive back the conversation, we are going to redirect the user to the newly created conversation. And if there is an error, we're simply logging it. Okay, so coming back, so that's for sending a message. And before implementing this, so as you can see, when I send, we're not seeing the messages because we don't have this. But before, I'm gonna go back up in the component and explain some stuff. So here, that's the function that I explained in a bit earlier, and that is the one I explained just before. But there we also have this use effect. Okay, and what this use effect is doing is that it's subscribing to this conversation, so that when someone send, like when the other person in the conversation send a message, we don't have to refresh the page. So we simply grab the message and we update our conversation, the conversation that we previously fetched using this endpoint, this REST endpoint. And how we are doing, so we are saying we first check if the message that we received is part of the conversation messages or not. If it is the case, it means it is a new message, so we simply add it at the end of the conversation. If it's not the case, it means that it's an existing message, but it has been updated, like let's say the other person has read the message. So when that happens, we just update it here, like so. So that is done, and this I explained it. Like when we are on the new, we grab the suggestions, the users that are here, and if it's not the case, we grab the conversation and set it. Save. And also we have another subscription, and this subscription, what it is doing, actually before explaining it, I'm gonna talk about this use effect. So in this use effect, we are grabbing all the conversations that are out there, and we are using this one to know, like when I click on a suggestion here, when I click on a suggestion, let's say, where was I? Yeah, when I click on a suggestion button here, we are checking if there is a conversation between our logged in user and the selected one. How we know that? Because we have a conversations state that's by default set to an empty array, and when the page render, we're using this REST endpoint to set it. But it could be that, like when while the user is speaking with one of them, another one has sent him a new conversation, like this one. Okay, and if we don't track that by subscribing to this WebSocket, we could have like we wouldn't know that when the user click on one of these, okay, there's already a conversation that is started by the other one. So that's what we are doing here. Here also, we're grabbing the conversation and check if the conversation is already part of the conversation that we already have fetched. It means that simply something has changed within it. So that's what we are doing here. And if it's a new one, we are simply adding at the end of the at the start. It doesn't actually really matter, but yeah, we are adding it at the top of the array. And you're gonna be able to play with all of this, because I will be committing at the end of the video, and you will be having a commit. The commit that's gonna be after this one. The commit that's gonna be after this one, I'm gonna call it implement the chat frontend. Is going to be the one where I would push all of this. Okay, so if you want to play around it, you're gonna be find it there. And I want you to know the commit, because I don't know, because in future videos we could have updated this chat, And for you to have what I actually did in this actual video, use the right commit message. Okay, so coming back, we're gonna now increment this, and we're gonna create this messages component. So this messages component, I'm gonna come here in the component folder here and create it. So we're gonna call it messages, create messages. Also create it style messages dot model dot css. So it should have been messages, like so, and we are going to import it here. Okay, and we should define the props of this messages component. I'm gonna paste it and explain. So this messages component is going to accept a props where we would have a list of messages, a user, and the conversation ID. So if we come back to the conversation page, that's what we're passing. Actually, we're passing the messages of the conversation, the connected user, and also the conversation ID. And I'm going to be explaining why we're passing actually like this. It is you understand it because we want to display messages, so we should pass. But why we are passing these two, I'm going to explain in a bit. So we're going to come back here. So this actually should be user, like so. And I'm going, yeah, and it's imported. And this message component, we don't have it, but we're going to be creating a bit. So we're receiving this, and we're also defining what the message is. You could just like check the the message that we are getting from the API and create it, but I already know it. So a message is going to have an ID, a sender, a receiver, a content, whether it's read or not, and the creation date. And here we're grabbing the messages array, the user, and the conversation ID, and we are mapping over the messages and rendering this message component that we don't have yet. And to this message component, we are passing the user, the conversation ID, and the one conversation. And we need to create this. So I'm going to go into the components folder again and create this message. It's going to be message dot model dot css, and also message dot tsx. For now, I'm just going to be rendering nm. Coming back here, we are going to import it like so. So as you can see, we have one conversation between these two, but if I send another, we have two of them, but we are simply rendering in this im. So coming back here, what this message is going to contain, I'm also going to paste it and explain what it is doing. I'm going to paste it. Bear with me, I'm going to explain, it's going to make sense. So our message component is receiving the message that it should display, a user. I'm going to explain why we need this user and also why we need the conversation ID. So we need to import the user from our context and the interface that we just defined in our messages component. Let me import this useref, the use effect, and this time ago that we built in previous videos. So now as you can see, it's looking, we are displaying the messages, but they are looking ugly. But before adding this style, I'm going to let me actually add this style, and then I'm gonna explain the markup and then this style. It's gonna be simpler. So coming back here, what we are doing is that, so I'm also gonna import this request. So the first thing that we are doing is that when this component render, okay, when this component render, I want to make a call to our to this URL and mark the message as read. So when we call this endpoint, is going to grab the ID of the message and it's going to mark it as read. That's how we are going to be able to change this to to read. But we don't make this conversation like for all renders. We only do it when the message is not read, and also the user, okay, the logged in user. That's why we are actually getting this user. Okay, so the logged in user is the receiver of the message. So if that happens, we do that, and then we are adding this because we actually we can update it a little bit. We don't need the conversation ID here, and so we are using, I'm actually going to remove this and let slint update this for me. So yeah, this is the correct one. So we don't need finally this one. I think that I changed it. I used to need it because I actually kind of changed the logic while I'm working on this. And with the help of this use effect and the message ref, we're able to scroll into the view whenever a new message is read. So we, like, let's say the user has a scroll at the top and a new message is added, we would scroll it at the bottom. So that's what we're doing. And then the message itself, so what it is rendering. So first thing first, we have a class name that's a root for the message here. So it is this one, and we're saying that the message should have a width of 70%. And then if the message sender ID is our logged in user, we add this class that says send, and if it's not the case, we add the received class, and we use these two. So here we say that when it is sent, I want you to like push the message to the right, and also change the background color and the color of it. Okay, and if it's not the case, it's gonna be at the left by default. So coming back, and then we are rendering the message itself. So the message is composed of the top of the message, which is this, where we are showing the user with its name and first name, and then this time ago that's below the username, and then we are rendering the message content. And below that we are rendering this component, and this we only show it when the sender ID is our current ID. So if if we are the receiver, it doesn't make sense to have this. Okay, so here we say if the message is not read, we show this div with the message that says this SVG that I grabbed from Awesome with this span that says sent. And if it's not the case, we show another span and like the I span, and we say it's read. And coming back to the style, so the message by default, so if I go let's say to another conversation like this one, and I'm gonna send one, actually let's say, yeah, here. So as you can see here, when I have received the message, it has this background color. So that's what we have here. So by default the message has this background color, and when it is sent, we are sending the background color. Okay, and this is the style for the status. Our time ago is actually weird because I forgot to add the time class. It's going to be time, and we're going to say that the color should be inherited. So I want to use the color of the message because the message is changing the color whether it is sent or not. So when it doesn't have the sent, it's going to be black, and when we send, it's going to be, the color is going to be white, and I want the time to inherit every time. But it didn't change again. Actually the time ago didn't, it wasn't able to accept this a class name, but we're gonna change it a little bit here. So we're gonna say that it should extend the let's say, I'm gonna import it, HTML attributes, and we'll be using the div attributes here. And here we're going to grab the class name, but also all the others. And here we're going to say, yeah, like so. If we have a class name, I want you to use it alongside the root and also render all the other props. So now as you can see, it has changed. And also this shouldn't be actually touching this. So we're gonna come here to the messages here, and I'm gonna paste the styling. So we'd have a padding, add some flex, display flex, a gap, so that we separate them, and I'm adding this overflow like Y to auto, so that when I have like a lot of messages, instead of changing the height of the page, I would simply have a scroll in here. And that we're able to do that because on our conversation here we are setting a height, and we have a display grid of some rows. So this row, the row of the messages, should take all the available height out of the height of the parent, and when it's going to if it wants to go beyond this, because its content is bigger, with the overflow auto here, sorry, I was looking for this. So with this overflow, like if I remove this, it is actually going to overflow. As you can see, it's overflowing from its parent. So by adding, we make sure that we have a scrolling within here. I'm gonna come back. So the last thing that's remaining is actually the notification that should be appearing here. So let's say John is here and Anne sent him a message from here. Okay, so it's saying it's sent, but John is not aware that he has received a new message unless he go here, in which case this is shown. So how we do that, we're gonna go actually into our header component, which is being in the component here, this one, and we're gonna do like we did for the other notifications, meaning like here, if I let's say like one of the Jones, I'm gonna like, so I'm receiving this notification, and that we are doing it also here with this notification, with this use effect that runs when the component renders, like it fetches the notifications from the database, and also it subscribes to a notification, so that when there is a new one, it updates it without the user has to refresh the page so that this one runs. So we'll be having actually a similar logic here. So we are gonna have a list of conversations with an S, like so, and we're gonna import our conversation interface, like so, and we're gonna say we're gonna use a use effect. So here we're gonna call our request, like so, and the endpoint for this one is going to be /API/messaging/conversations, and on success we're going to set the conversation list, and on failure we are simply going to log this one, and we are going to go up here and we're going to use a reducer. So we'll be going through all the conversations, and for each conversation we're going to go through its messages, and we're going to check if the sender of the message is not the ID of the login user, and that the message is not read. We are going to grab it with this filter, okay, and then we are going to take the length of the filtered messages and add it to the 0. That will be our initial number of messages that are not read. So this way we are going to be able to know the number of messages that are not read across all the conversations where this user is involved. Make this is small, and I'm going to use this one, this below, here. So now instead of simply rendering this messaging span, we're gonna render a div where we would render the messaging like before, but before it we are also gonna check if there are messages that are not read. And if you remember, even though I have a message here, for now the styling is bad. If I go to the message, I'm gonna let this one to show the notification, and I don't need this one anymore. So that's what we are doing here, using the location that's coming from use location hook from React Router DOM and show it. And the other thing that we need to do is also add a subscription like we did for the notifications, but this time for the conversations. So let me make it smaller. And what we are doing is the same as before. Grab the conversation and check if it already exists. It means that one of his messages has changed, so we're gonna update it. Otherwise, so we're gonna update it. And if it's a new conversation, we're simply gonna add it to the conversation array. So with that, we're able, sorry, I'm gonna close this one again. So with that, we're able to update the notifications without having to refresh the page so that this use effect run. Okay. So now if I make it bigger, we have this notification here, but since we're on the page, we're not showing. But if I go back, like if I change the tab, we're getting like it's saying 1, because there is one message that's not read, but the styling is bad. And I'm gonna come back, so here in the header, and update it. You're gonna check it later if you want to know like what's happening here in the code. So come back here, and also I'm going to add this class on the LE here. So this class, if I show you a little bit what's happening here, so this class we're using so that we style the notifications and the messaging like on this, like the same way, and all of them has this batch within them. So this way we have similar behavior for the messaging and the notification. So guys, that's it for this video. As you can see, we have built a complete chat application that's very professional. In the upcoming one, we'll be working on other parts of the application, so we'll continue to build on top of this project, so we have something that as close as possible to the actual LinkedIn website. And I'm going to be committing everything that we did, like I said, in the GitHub repo, so that you are able to have the final code. Let me know what you have thought of this video via a comment, or by liking it, by sharing with your friends who are also maybe interested in these topics, and by subscribing. I will see you in the next one very soon. Thank you so much.